So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, happy Mental Health Awareness Week. Hey, Christian, see you down there, right, mate? Snuck in. Welcome to the session. Thank you. 30 of you turning up. 6 times more than turned up to yesterday afternoon sea containers. So, MLP 1, sea containers nil. But I'm back there Thursday, so gauntlet is down. Are we all in the right place? No one's going to wander out all sheepishly going, I thought this was all about business planning. Good. We're going to be here for somewhere between half an hour and an hour. Largely depends on how much we talk. Thank you for coming along. My name's hello. My name's not hello. And I did say it a bit lecturously, didn't I? I went, hello. Come in, come in.
Thank you very much.
They're all wondering what my name is now. My name's Kevin, I'm one half of this organisation, Big Dog, Little Dog. Can you guess which one I am? Thank God, otherwise I'd have to have like this 8'4" freak coming to work with me each day. I'll tell you a quick bit about us before we get stuck into the session. There's me, there's the little fella. People ask how little is the little dog. He's 5'7", but in my family, like 12-year-olds are 5'7". We are 2 former chief execs of businesses who decided as we reached 50, we were fed up with the rat race, and we decided we wanted to work part-time, doing stuff we love, and enjoying the rest of life. So we travel around doing stuff around mental health and employment, mainly training, but consultancy as well. Mental health first aid, who here's a mental health first aider, hands up? Good, more than 1 in 10. And we also deliver Job Centre Plus's own mental health training for their advisors. You can imagine what it's like being one of those. So thank you for coming along to the session. It's largely me talking, but let's see if we can have a chat along the way. Okay, you should have signed up for this. This is what we're talking about, stress. Yeah, there's my 2 people getting all stressed and one more time. Go on. How'd you go? Back you go. And boom, there we go. Let's look into what stress is first. So it's really pertinent, Mental Health Awareness Week. Yesterday, ACAS released a new report all around stress and the workplace. Now, I just wanted to pull down a couple of those stats for us to consider. Can you see? You can't be able to see there. We need mirrors. Can you see my screen?
Oh, yeah.
Test your eyesight. A couple of stats from the report released yesterday. First of all, there was the one asking, have you felt stressed or anxious about work in the last year? And that was the result there. 2/3 of people said they had. Pull that stat apart a little bit more, and what we find is us older people, not so much. Still, more than half of the workforce said I felt stressed or anxious about working last year, but less than average. The biggest age range for it, and I say this knowing the typical profile of Kantar staff, the under 35s. 76% said yes, I felt stressed or anxious about working the last 12 months. So it's clearly an issue in the workplace that we need to address. Another part of the stat, just to pick apart while we're there, is the question of would you talk to your manager about stress or anxiety? And we saw that marginally more people said no rather than yes, but that's not right. If we think that managers are a source of our stress, more than half say I wouldn't feel comfortable having that conversation. Even more worryingly, 78% of people said they wouldn't talk to anybody at work about their mental health. About normalising that conversation. So it's great that so many of you have volunteered to come along today. So let's get stuck into it. First of all, when I use the word stress, what is stress?
I think it's a physical condition.
There's physical aspects to it?
Yeah, symptoms, yeah.
Symptoms?
Sort of worry, anxiety.
Worry, anxiety? Worrying about what?
Time, not enough time to do stuff.
Uh-huh.
Forgetting things, in my case.
Something that may or may not happen.
Right, so we might stress over something that doesn't even happen, which was worthless stress. Is stress always a bad thing?
No.
No? So there is such thing as good stress?
Yes.
I'll check your vocabulary on that in a minute. The way I like to describe it is it's the feeling of being under pressure. Two key things about giving it that definition. Number one, that's quite a neutral statement, isn't it? It's not necessarily bad, feeling under pressure. It can be good. Secondly, it's a feeling. And feelings are generated by our own minds. And for me, that's such an important point, because often we talk about stress like it's some airborne virus that we catch. And if we acknowledge it's our own feelings, then we can take more ownership of our stress. Critical point for us. People go, no, stress is all the things that are happening to me in life. No, they're not. They're called stressors. Stuff going on in life that make you feel under pressure. And on the left there, I've put some typical work stressors. On the right, some typical rest of life stressors. And some people will find those positively stressful, some people negatively stressful. So stress is how our brain reacts to these things going on in our life. Have I sold that concept to everyone? Because the rest of it is hopeless unless you all go, yes, Kev. Okay. So, vocabulary time. Is this word a good word or a bad word?
Neutral.
Neutral word, brilliant. If I say there is a word for bad stress, and you all know what it is, what is it?
Distress.
Distress. Distress is the correct answer. That's what distress means. Distress means bad stress. Right, here we go. If I was to say there's a word for good stress, who knows it? Eustress. Check out Charlotte. Round of applause for Charlotte, please. Charlotte's only the second person ever in a presentation I've done that has known that word. None of us know it. Eustress. Because we don't tend to talk about stress in its positive context. Is that fair enough? And here's my amateur way of explaining the difference between the two at work. This is me, at my desk, working on my laptop. The yellow circle represents what my life's like at the moment. And truth be known, it's a good life. There's no distress in there at all. If pushed, I could actually take on more stress. And we call that our comfort zone. What makes something stressful for me is when I'm given something to do and I perceive that I've got the time, the resources, the skills to be able to achieve it. If that happens, I stay within my comfort zone. It's stressful. I've got the time, the resources, the skills necessary to get it done. If, however, the red circle, you give me something to do, and I perceive that I haven't got any of those things, this is what happens. Watch my eyebrows. Not a happy Kevin. That's when it becomes distressful. And the key word I've used there in describing it is it's actually as much about perception as reality. Any managers in the room? Good, managers turning up, good, good, good. You can give your team a task that you are sure they're completely capable of, and they may still find it distressful, because if they don't see that those bits are in order, distress. Are we good? Great. So, how do we go about managing our stress? The mental health first aid is in the room. You know the model that's coming, but we're going to build on it a bit higher than we do on mental health first aid. Is it fair to say some people can handle more stress than others? Yeah? Me versus my missus. I have low stress vulnerability. I can take all the stress in the world to a limit. My missus, dodgy episode of EastEnders and she's all over the place. And we call this stress vulnerability. And the way we talk about it and get people to envisage it in mental health first aid terms is to say, imagine within you we've all got a bucket where all our stress goes. Each day, as stresses happen, our bucket fills. Your bucket size is driven by how vulnerable or not you are to stress. Just thinking about this for a moment on a typical day. You wake up, your eyes open. Who here, more often than not, when your eyes open, there's already something on your mind? Hands up. So you've already got some stuff going on in your bucket and you've just woken up. The rest of us probably get halfway down the stairs before we go, oh God, that meeting today. But our bucket starts to fill. Thinking about a typical work day, in between getting up, but before you leave the door for work, what kind of stressors might you encounter at home?
Getting kids ready.
Kids. Any others? Transport. Hearing train cancellations, road closures. Any other stressors at home?
Can't find your shoes, can't find your keys.
Yep.
Just running around looking for things. Yeah.
No one said partners yet, which is great. I really admire you for that one, Chris. Where is she?
Bad hair day.
Bad hair day, dishwasher's broken. So stress is filling our bucket and we haven't even left for work yet. Thinking about your average day coming to work. Journey stressors, what do you get?
Overcrowded trains.
Overcrowded trains,
Delays.
delayed trains, cancelled trains,
Stinky people.
stinky people. School kids, cyclists, roadworks if you're driving. Our bucket continues to fill. We haven't got to work yet. We get to work. What kind of stressors do you have here at Kantar?
Network.
Network. No hesitation in that one.
Jam packed.
What else?
Yes.
What else? People. Oh, someone said people. Customers, managers, staff, colleagues, deadlines, targets. Bucket continues to fill. And then finally you clock off for the day. Ka-ching. Yay. All those stresses you had on the way to work, you now get on the way home, don't you? Plus maybe some drunken people thrown in for a good mix. Get home, turn your key in the door, and all those people and things that were at home this morning stressing you out are still there. So you can see, depending on how big your bucket is, how much stress you can take, you could end up with a full bucket on just a normal day. And I haven't mentioned things like relationship problems, debt, housing issues, a bereavement. So this bucket can fill before we know it. And the problem with it filling is we have the risk of it overflowing. And then we get something called emotional snapping. What might that look like? Breakdowns. How do people know when you are stressed out?
Oh, we shout.
Shouting.
Can't focus.
No focus.
Go red.
Red.
Sorry.
Other than just her. Your self-awareness is great. Any other behaviours you might see in someone who's stressed to the max?
They can go quiet actually. Go in.
Clam up.
Talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Short-tempered.
Short-tempered, crying. So this is not a good place to be. We never want our bucket to get overflowing. Is that fair enough? Have I sold the pros of keeping your bucket empty to you? Good, because now we'll look at how we can actually manage this bucket. How can we cope better with stress? First of all, what stress do we let into our bucket? Are you ready for my lid? This took hours and hours of software development, this. If we accept that a stress is a feeling that we generate, then we can take more responsibility for saying, I'm not going to stress about this, or I'm not going to stress so much about it. Prevent the stress getting in the first place. But stress gets in, and good stress we might want in. So we also need a way of emptying our bucket. What can we fit onto the side of a bucket that would empty it out? A tap is the right answer. There's my tap. And we call these coping strategies. Helpful coping strategies. Give me an example of a helpful coping strategy, please.
Exercise.
Exercise.
Alcohol.
Okay. It's fine. I need someone to say it because then I can clarify what the NICE guidelines, and the NICE guidelines are the treatment guidelines for this country. This is what the NICE guidelines say about alcohol and stress. If, keywords here, if you have a small drink occasionally to take the edge off the day, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's a helpful coping strategy.
Thank you.
However, if you drink too often and or to excess, it becomes an unhelpful coping strategy. Any other helpful coping strategies we use?
Meditation.
Meditation. Do you say stop caring? I'm not going to argue. Any others?
Get someone else to do it.
Get someone else to do it?
Delegate.
Yeah.
And sharing.
Sharing,
Yeah.
talking,
Yeah.
great. And then we have unhelpful coping strategies. So I mentioned drinking too much or too often. What other unhelpful coping strategies might there be?
Not talking about it.
Not talking, bottling it up. Who does that a lot? Us geezers. We're hard. Can't show our feelings. Any other unhelpful coping strategies? None? Are you all that saintly and angelic?
Eating.
Eating. Comfort eating. Comfort eating, if done twice or more a week, on a weekly basis, actually becomes a mental health disorder called binge eating disorder. No one mentioned drugs, which is great. None of you were thinking of drugs, ever. Smoking's the one that always interests me. There's a legend around the bumblebee. And the legend has it that scientists have proved that a bumblebee's wings are too small for its body mass. A bumblebee cannot fly. But no one's told the bumblebee that. So it flies. And it's great. It's not true, but it's just a legend. Smoking's the same. A smoker, and I say this with my little packet here of vapes. Smoking contains nicotine. What is nicotine? A drug. What does that drug do to your nervous system? It's a stimulant. The last thing it's going to do is calm you down. But there's two reasons why smoking helps smokers relax. Number one, forces them to breathe deeper and slower, and that's good for all of us. Number two, the smoker believes it will calm him or her down, so it does. But research suggests every cigarette you smoke knocks 9 minutes off your life. Other ones down here, violence. You may have guessed by now I'm an ex-copper. So often when I went to domestic violence incidents, the scumbag would blame his stress on why he beat her to crap. Self-harm. Self-harm is not a mental health disorder. It's a really crap coping strategy. It's the way that some people with poor mental health empty their bucket. So we want to steer away from these and have lots of the green ones. Which of these two tactics do I prefer? Well, this one is your proactive one that stops you getting distressed in the first place. So that's always got to be a preference to the reactive one. But of course, we always want to make sure that we are emptying our bucket, and not just at the end of the day, throughout the day. And we'll look at some techniques now for bucket management. You ready for it? Yeah. So first of all, how well do you know your bucket? Because we don't often ask ourselves, what stresses me out? What's my stress signature? How do people know when my bucket's overflowing? We need to ask ourselves these questions. So in terms of your bucket, how big is your bucket? What's your stress vulnerability like, and how could you make it bigger? And I'll give you a couple of tips on that in a minute. You should know how empty it is when you wake up each morning. Preferably, you sort everything out the night before and go to bed, clear mind, wake up with a clear mind. Preferably. And know what your stresses are. Know what fills your bucket typically, at home, at work, in between, and outside of all those environments. In terms of your lid, How good is it at preventing stress getting in the first place? How could you make it better? Again, we'll look at some tips. What is your stress signature? How do you, friends, family, colleagues, spot that your bucket's full? Because we're not always good at noticing that ourselves, are we? Fair comment? And then when it comes to your tap, what coping strategies do you use? When you've had a really bad day and you get home, what are your taps? What are your coping strategies? How often do you apply them? And are your ones the best ones? Are there other coping strategies that you don't use that maybe you'd get a lot out of? And then the final question on that, do you empty your bucket thoroughly before you go to bed each night? Sounds a bit like going to the toilet, doesn't it? We love the stress bucket in mental health first aid, because if you've been on one of these sessions, you know what the hell we're talking about. It means next time you see someone else in this room, instead of saying, how are you, you go, how's your bucket? Achieves two things. First of all, you're having a specific conversation about stress, which has got to be good. Number two, watch the faces of other people in the room that haven't come on one of these workshops. Wicked to watch. Okay, so some techniques for you. How do we grow our bucket? Three things for you. Number one, big dog, little dog, so it's all dog related, of course. Sleep. Enough sleep. When you don't get enough sleep, your bucket shrinks. You become rattier. 7.5 to 9 hours a night. Who gets that? About a fifth of you, if that. So make sure our sleep techniques, our sleep management is correct. Second one, eating good, healthy food. And the old saying that breakfast is the most important meal of the day is especially true from a psychological point of view. A good, healthy breakfast gets the brain working and the bucket stretched for your day. Lastly, stay well. Think about if you've ever got a cold or a virus, you become rattier, don't you? Your bucket shrinks, your stress vulnerability increases. So do the kinds of good things that keep you well, and when you suspect you're not well, do something about it early, please. Seek appropriate help early. Those three techniques can help keep your bucket at its maximum size. What about the lid? Oh, there it goes. Hours of development. Three things to say about making your lid as effective as possible. First of all, question, what stress am I letting in? Who here knows what the Serenity Prayer is? Go for it.
Oh God, I don't know what. Grant me to accept the things I can't change, to deal with the things I don't know. There's something about knowing the difference, yeah.
Yeah, that's about 70% of it. Well done, well done. Grant me the serenity to accept the things in life that I can't change. The bravery to change the things I can. And the wisdom to know the difference. Wonderful, tiny little ode that. Used heavily by Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm saying nothing, just a statement of fact. But it's great. Serenity to accept the things in life I cannot change. How often do we find ourselves stuck at roadworks, growling? Well, either turn the car around and go somewhere else, or just sit back and wait. Because filling your bucket isn't going to do any good. What's the point in that? So we need to challenge what we're stressing about and go, is it even worth stressing about? If we can challenge that with conscious thought, we start challenging our subconscious that's generating this stress. Second one, how often do we find we're stressing this much about a stressor that's this big? And we need to take time to challenge our stress responses. And again, use our conscious mind to say, am I going a bit over the top here? Because if we challenge the mind with that, we start to change stress levels. The third lid management technique is using CBT on yourself. What's CBT? Good. No one said computer-based training. Cognitive behavioural therapy. Now, what CBT is in a nutshell, think of the first two words. It looks to change your cognitive behaviour. Looks to change the way your mind works. And the easiest way to explain CBT is with the ABC. Here's my ABC. Activate an event, beliefs, thoughts and emotions, consequences. Example, Chris is walking up the street next Saturday and he sees me walking across the other side of the road. And he goes, "Ooh!" That's what he does. And I just carry on walking. Something happens. Chris goes, "You just blanked me. The big fella's just..." Maybe it was something I said in that session he did. Maybe he just actually doesn't like me very much. And the next time I come here, Chris sees me and ducks into the toilets. So this middle bit, if we apply negative beliefs, thoughts and emotions to stuff that happens, it's highly likely it will lead to negative outcomes. And the way CBT works is a therapist helps the patient understand when this happens, what's your default way of thinking about it? Is there a more helpful way of thinking about it? And why don't we give it a go? And then let's measure the consequences. So the next time it happens and I blank him, he goes, "That's not right, Kev. I hope he's okay." Crosses over the road and goes, "Big fella, you alright?" And I go, "Chris, I was in a world all of my own, mate. I am so sorry. Got a lot going on, mate." And Chris goes, "Let's have a pint. I'm paying." So please, in terms of managing your lid, challenge how positively, negatively, objectively you're processing what's going on. Because there's a danger we slip into negative default thinking without even realising it. Make sense?
Yeah.
Grand. So, lastly, let's talk about coping strategies. Did you notice my tap dripping there? Hours and hours of software development. Talking is the best. Or being listened to is the best. If you can find a good listener, because we're not typically very good listeners, are we? We tend to listen enough, just enough to get a solution, and then shut the person down and present it to them. Let's listen. Talking is the best. Bucket empty. Exercise. There's a statement for you. As effective as antidepressants in treating mild to moderate depression. That's an incredibly powerful statement, isn't it? It's true. You mentioned some more. There's a few up there. Some work better for others. Sleep is mine. I can go home after a really stressful day, hour and a half, and I feel like a new man. But the next person, when they're stressed, put their head on the pillow and their eyes are wide open. It depends on what works for the individual. Most of all, please find the time. When we teach mental health first aid, at the end of day one, we have what's known as happiness hour homework. And everyone is required to spend an hour on themselves that evening emptying their bucket. The amount of times I get people coming back for day two and they went, "Oh, I didn't have time." Really? Because you had 24 hours, the same as everybody else. So really two things that I need to say to that person. Number one, get over yourself. You're really that fundamentally important to the universe that you couldn't take an hour out for yourself. Secondly, most often, when I have someone say, "I couldn't find the time," like me, they're a parent. And what I always like to say to that person is, you are doing your child a disservice by not doing this. Empty your bucket and then give them the best you. You'll be doing them a favour having a glass of wine. Oh shit, this is being recorded now. So let's make sure we find the time. The word selfish is not always a negative word. We should look at self as number one in terms of things like managing our mental health. Fair dues? In terms of at work, what kind of coping strategies? That's the big one for me. Put the damn phone down. The amount of, I call them Flemings, phone lemmings. I'm 6'8", I'm 21 stone. As soon as I go anywhere near public transport, these people are willing to die walking at me because they're going like that. You're stupid. We seem to have this thinking that we've always got to have access and be accessible. What pressure does that put on us as human beings? If I had my way, every mobile network would shut down between 6 and 7 p.m. every evening. And then you know what would happen in families around the country? They'd all put their damn phones down and, God forbid, talk to each other. It's a massive one, particularly outside of work time. Oh, the boss has sent me an email. If I respond straight away, it shows how really important I take my job. Take yourself more seriously. The second one, regular brain breaks. Doesn't have to be a 15-minute break out of the building, but just changing what your brain is focused on. Your attention span peaks at 12 minutes. You lot started falling asleep about 20 minutes ago. So give yourself regular, move your thinking onto something else. Move your stress onto something else, and you do a stress reset then. Empty your bucket with others. There's this thing called the 5 Ways to Well-Being. New Economics Foundation did a lot of research into what lifts the mood, and they come up with these 5 activities. Connect with others, learn, be active, I'm trying to remember the others now, give, which doesn't have to be something financial, and take notice of the world around you. You can do any of those with a colleague during a break. So share your bucket emptying activities with other people. Talk and listen while you're at it. And crucially, if you can find this person or these people within the organisation who can sit and listen non-judgmentally and just let you empty your bucket all over their head. And there's no one in your organisation better placed for this than your mental health first aiders, because they've all been trained to listen. And you can go to a mental health first aider within Kantar and go, I just need a chat. And they will sit and they will listen. And if they don't listen, I'll give you my number. I'm pretty much at the end. I just need promise making time now. Now you don't have to make these promises, it's totally up to you. I would like you to consider making a couple of promises here. Promise number 1, thinking back to the lid strengthening. I talked about the serenity prayer. I talked about checking that stress was proportionate. I talked about using CBT. Think how you might strengthen your bucket more and challenge what stress is coming in. Make a promise to yourself about it. Secondly, thinking about your tap. Have a think about a coping strategy that you know of, you've never done before, and you think you might like. Make a promise to yourself that you'll look into it and preferably have a go at it. Expand your portfolio of bucket emptying techniques. Third and lastly, do have a thought, please, about how can you help colleagues and family to empty their buckets and create that proper two-way relationship where you're there for each other. Just give that a bit of thought, please. The final slide says, have you got any questions?
How can you access CBT? Where do you find resources? What's good kind of resources?
Yeah, good question. Do you mean one-to-one CBT?
Or anything, just if you've never come across it before or whatever.
Yeah, grand. So first of all, in every local authority in the country, there is a service funded to deliver it. That service is called IAPT. Improving Access to Psychological Therapies. What a horrible acronym. If you Google IAPT and the borough that you live in, they offer fully funded CBT, other talking therapies, counselling. And you can refer yourself. You don't have to go via a GP. They're there to support anyone with mild to moderate anxiety, depression. Increasingly, online solutions are really working. Big White Wall is probably the biggest provider of online CBT, the big white wall, but also look at some apps. Headspace is a really good one. Increasingly, apps are being used as our own informal way of being able to use CBT on ourselves. Thank you for having the bravery to ask a question. Look, you've started a flood there.
In case anybody can use the information, please share our insurance policy.
I'd be really surprised if your insurance doesn't cover it. And please do think about the occupational health, the EAP, the insurance, all those benefits you get working for a large employer like Kantar. They're bound to offer private CBT, no waiting lists. Any other questions? Should we distribute the slide deck after today, Charlotte? Should we do that? So that if there's anything up there that people want to keep hold of. You've got my email address there. Got little dogs, if you want to drop in, Malloy. And there's our phone numbers. The really clever ones amongst you will know from the American way of doing phone numbers. That's 07956 BDLD 01. Big dog, little dog in the house. Ladies and gents, I am so happy that so many of you turned up today. Apologies to the wings that probably didn't get the full-on multimedia experience. Thank you for your time. Get out of my lives and may your buckets be forever empty. Thank you.